Hi guys, nice to see you here this Sunday morning. Just give me 1 second to get quickly set up over here. And while I'm doing that, why don't you guys tell me how your week has gone, what you've been up to, and just say hi and let me know where you're tuning in from. Okay, let me see. Got so much stuff to get through this week. So let me just get this set up and then I will give you my full and undivided attention. Oh, Facebook's been super buggy this week. Like different things aren't loading as they're supposed to. Different functions aren't loading as they're supposed to. But anyway, yeah. So, how are you guys doing? I've had a bit of an interesting week. As most of you probably know, we've restarted our monthly Dojishuktam Pujas as a public affair. So that took place this past Friday. And hi Keng Hoi, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. On Friday that's just passed, we had our first public Dojishuktam monthly puja. First time it's been public since the movement control order was imposed, and that was good. It was very, very full in the sense, all the designated seats that we had, with everyone maintaining social distancing and everything. Seats were full, so that was good. And on that same day, good morning Hook Peng, thank you for joining us this morning. So on the same day, on Friday, we took a large delivery of items, like a lorry, a truckload full of items, which had just arrived for the Tsemmamche indoor relic stupa project. So we unloaded all of that and then sorted through all of that, and that took place on Friday. So it was very auspicious. On the day that we have our Dojishuktam Puja, then these items for Rinpoche's indoor relic stupa arrived. And good morning, Datuk May. And as you guys know, Manjushri Guest House has reopened, Enchanted Forest has reopened. We've restarted our Spiritual Saturday programs. And then we've got other stuff planned, right? So on August the 15th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m, we have our first ever Pets Day. So dogs and cats below 16 inches and below, measured from their feet to their shoulders. They will be allowed into KFR for circumambulation and pastor's blessings and all that. So that's going to be a lot of fun, having so many dogs and cats around. And so I'm just going to wait a little while for a few more people to join us before we get started today on today's topic. Good morning, Sukfan. Thank you for joining us this morning, and I hope that you guys had a good morning meditation session with JP and his guests. Just waiting for a couple more people to join us before we get started. Facebook, it's so weird. Anyway, and then last week, the week just passed, I started training for that very, very big project that I'm going to be doing. So that's happening. And then this coming week, Pastor David is doing his Dojishuktam retreat. So if you guys go to the Kechara and Friends Facebook group, you'll see his updates there about his altar setup and all that, so that if you guys want to accompany him, join him while he's doing the retreat, join him maybe, as in like you do it yourself at home, simultaneously with him. He's put up all the information there for people to do the retreat alongside him. Good morning, Bradley, and good morning, Huyen Nguyen. I'm so sorry, I have no familiarity with pronouncing Vietnamese names. But thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. All right, so today, I'm going to be talking about a topic, but before I get into that, I'm going to do a short prayer to ascribe the source of the information that will be shared today. I go for refuge in my Lama, from whom I've received these teachings. I go for refuge in the lineage Lamas, from whom my Lama has received these teachings. All right, so like I said, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Before I get started on today's topic, just a quick recap of what I spoke about last week. Last week I talked about the importance of enthusiasm. And good morning, Tenzin Kyapsum, JC. So yeah, last week I spoke about the importance of enthusiasm, and I talked about why enthusiasm and diligence are so important and why we should cultivate it, and how we should cultivate it. And good morning, Jillian. Thank you for joining us this morning. So yes, last week, enthusiasm and diligence, and I spoke about why it's useful for us to know how we can cultivate diligence and enthusiasm, not just for our spiritual goals, but also because we, in general, all of us, we are quite inconsistent. And what Rinpoche always shared is that if we want to have success in our life, whether it's within the spiritual realm or whether it's within our secular life, that consistency is a key quality that we need to develop, and applying or working towards anything consistently is what will bring us to success. So diligence combined with enthusiasm will help us to develop consistency, and help us to develop a drive to continue in spite of whatever obstacles or challenges we may face, and it will help us to develop longevity in our efforts. All right. So a couple of you also last week, good morning Kimberlyn, sorry. So a couple of you last week also told me that you liked what I shared about how every moment is an opportunity to make a new decision. So yes, if you mess up, if you stumble, if you fall, if you slip, which all of us do, if you break a commitment, if you fail to uphold something, and so on, don't let it get to you. Just remember that, just because we have messed up in one moment, just because we have stumbled in one moment, does not mean that we have to continue messing up in the next moment and in the next moment and so on. All right. So what Rinpoche said was that if we forget to do our sadhana one day, it does not mean that we have to forget to do it the next day. If we are irritable today, or if we react not so nicely to somebody today, it does not mean that we have to react in the same way to people again tomorrow. All right. So the other example that Rinpoche always gave was vows. So if we fail to uphold a vow today, or we break a vow today, it does not mean that we have to keep breaking it tomorrow. All right. So that was last week's talk on enthusiasm and on diligence, and talking about how to cultivate it for the benefit of our spiritual life as well as our secular commitments. And by the way, if you guys have a special request for a talk or for a topic to be covered or for a question to be answered, let me know, and then I'll get it done and then covered for you in a future video. But before I get into things today, I just want to, apart from refreshing the page because Facebook's so weird today, I just want to say thank you to the people who sponsored today's talk. Iman, who made the dedication, may all sentient beings and everyone who I care about find lasting happiness and awaken their innate, everlasting compassionate nature and wisdom. As well as Chu Suk Fan, with the dedication, may there be peace and happiness in everyone's life. All right, thank you guys so much. If you would like to sponsor a talk, there's a link in the description section of this video, so please do click on it. And your support helps us to continue making all of these online programs available, which we will continue to do, although KFR is basically slowly opening up. All right. And so this week's topic, really interesting. It's real juicy because I've touched on it on previous weeks. Just like last week when I talked about how this particular quality can be countered by enthusiasm and diligence. All right. So this week what I want to talk about is laziness. And the reason why I want to talk about laziness is because laziness is an obstacle to our practice. So it's kind of like a catch-22 situation, right? So we're trying to cultivate diligence and we're trying to cultivate consistency and enthusiasm in order to counter our laziness. But at the same time, it's our laziness that often prevents us from cultivating these qualities. So the question is, how do you move past it? And how do you get over it? And how do you overcome your laziness? Laziness and lazy is basically a dirty word, right? We don't like being called lazy, and we don't like being identified as lazy, and we ourselves tend to use the word lazy as an insult. So if you think back to when you were a child, what is it that was drummed into us at a very, very young age? What is it that our teachers, kept reinforcing us over and over again? What is it that, for example, tiger mothers are very, very famous for reinforcing in their children, which is that we're trained from a very young age to abhor laziness, to look at laziness as something that's bad and something that's destructive and something that's not helpful to us, right? So you might see, like let's say a group of mothers getting together and then comparing their children, or you might be with your parents and then your parents pointing at another child and saying things like, oh my God, see how lazy they are. And so from a young age, we are already trained to think of laziness as something that's not good. So since laziness is not good, and yet in spite of all this training that we've received, we're still very, very lazy, how do we overcome it and how do we get past it for our own benefit? So before we get into that, I'm going to talk about where laziness comes from. And ultimately, laziness arises from selfishness. So we're trying to cultivate compassion to counter our selfishness. And we know that it's good to be compassionate. We know that it's good to be kind. And we know it's good to do all of these things that our guru tells us to do or instructs us to do in order to cultivate compassion, in order to counter our selfishness. But the thing is, we're just too lazy to do it. And so it's not to say that it's when we don't move towards a cultivation of compassion, it's not to say that it's good or bad. Okay, it's not a judgment call at all. It's just when we look at what qualities we have, we shouldn't be making judgment calls. That's something that Rinpoche often reinforces. Just because someone has a particular quality does not mean that they are inherently good or bad. It doesn't mean that it's a statement of their overall character, their overall being. What Rinpoche said is that when we see or when we observe our own qualities or we observe the qualities of other people, it's observing with the intent to make an assessment of what qualities are beneficial to us and what qualities are constructive for our spiritual practice and for our secular success, and an assessment of what qualities are harmful. So what is it that's useful and what is it that's not? What is it that we need to get rid of if we want to be successful, and what is it that we should cultivate in order to be a success? All right, so what kind of lazinesses are there? Do you see your sticker? It's very apt because I feel like that right now, like lying down. Good morning, Jacinta. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, so now that we've talked about laziness, right? What kind of lazinesses are there? So Buddha Shakyamuni described 3 kinds of lazinesses. The first one is the laziness that all of us know, and that's the laziness of effort. So that's us when we don't want to do anything, when we would rather stay in bed for half an hour more than meditate, when we would rather eat everything that's in front of us instead of watching our diet so that we don't increase our cholesterol and our high blood pressure. All right, so this is the laziness that most of us are familiar with and most of us think of when someone mentions the word lazy. And how Rinpoche counted this was, Rinpoche was extremely meticulous in every single thing. So everything that was done together with Rinpoche, whenever Rinpoche gave instructions, because Rinpoche was so meticulous at it, it was an opportunity for us to train in maintaining this sense of care and maintaining this sense of awareness, putting in the effort to do that, to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing or whatever it is that you're working on is the best you can be. And the other way that Rinpoche also countered this laziness of effort was always being ever ready to assist others. So whether it was 3 in the morning and someone is very, very ill, or whether it's 2 p.m. and somebody needs some gifts delivered to them or something, that the people around Rinpoche were always ready and available to help. And this was one of the ways that Rinpoche trained his students to counter the laziness of effort. Now, the second type of laziness that the Buddha described was the laziness in thinking and in feeling ourselves unworthy. So this one's a bit more subtle and a bit different because we don't often think of this one as a form of laziness, but in reality it is. So thinking that I can't do this, I can't do something. Other people can meditate, other people can be mindful, other people can be kind, other people can be generous, other people can teach, other people can make sasas, other people can do pujas and so on. I can't. So when I describe it that way, and when I break it down that way, and I elaborate on it that way, I hope it makes it a little clearer for you how this laziness in thinking and in feeling ourselves unworthy is a form of laziness, which is to say, by thinking that we're unworthy of doing something, we don't need to pursue it, and we don't need to try it, and we don't need to go for it. All right, so I'm always an angry person, therefore I don't need to change. That's the subtext, right? So the statement is I'm always an angry person, but the subtext is I don't need to change, or I can't change. Or I've never been able to do anything in my life, so the subtext is therefore I don't need to try. Or I've always failed and I'm bound to fail. And so the subtext is, since I'm going to fail anyway, what's the point in starting? What's the point in trying? What's the use in pushing myself out of my comfort zone to try something new? Okay, so how did Rinpoche counter this? Rinpoche countered this second type of laziness, for example, during meetings. During meetings, oftentimes, Rinpoche will already have a plan or an idea in mind about how to approach something, whether it was construction, whether it was someone's black magic problem, whether it was a relationship issue or something. Rinpoche had an idea about how to approach a particular problem or particular challenge, but Rinpoche would oftentimes call for a meeting anyway. And so we would sit there and discuss and discuss and discuss. And, you know, there are many reasons for why Rinpoche would call a meeting. For example, to train us in looking at a problem from many different angles. But also, it was to push us and to challenge us to overcome this laziness in thinking. Why? Because in the course of discussion, invariably, some of your ideas will not be accepted. And, you know, at some point, you will start to come up with some pretty cockamamie ideas, pretty stupid ideas, but you try anyway, and you keep trying, and you keep pushing yourself to think. And each time you come up with something not so fantastic, you know, you'll get comments and you'll get looks. Not necessarily from Rinpoche, but, you know, from other people in the meeting as well. And it's a training to overcome that, to overcome people's judgment and to overcome people's thoughts and their opinions, and to keep pushing yourself to think of ways to resolve the problem. Right? So that's one way that Rinpoche would train us to counter the laziness of thinking and the laziness of feeling ourselves unworthy. And finally, the third type of laziness that Buddha Shakyamuni described is the laziness of action and distraction. So you guys might be thinking, how is this possible? If we keep ourselves distracted, we keep ourselves super busy, how is it laziness, since we're going to look super industrious? And the thing is that this laziness is about keeping ourselves so busy with worldly things that we don't have to face ourselves. Good morning, Penny, and good morning, Adeline. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, so laziness in action and distraction is keeping ourselves so busy with worldly things that we don't have to face ourselves. It's not that we shouldn't focus on friends, it's not that we shouldn't focus on family, and we shouldn't focus on other commitments, but it's a case of us realizing that there are other things to life than this, that there is a lot more to life than this. Excuse me. So every one of us, all of us, we're all brought up to think that, you know, having cars and having houses and having a high-flying career and traveling all over the world and all that, all of these are measures of success or markers of success. And so when we are trained in this in our secular life, it's sometimes something that we carry over even into our Dharma life. So for example, if we cannot walk super fast, if we don't have, photographic memory, if we haven't chanted 10 million mantras, if we haven't risen to a high position in the organization, if we, I don't know what else is there, if we're not like the most committed volunteer and we're at the temple every single day for 24 hours, things like that. We're trained from a young age to look for external markers of success. And so we keep chugging away at this, we keep plugging away at this, and we go on and on and on and on, and we keep going. And we keep thinking that just because we are occupied makes us virtuous. It's a reflection of how virtuous and how good we are. However, how is that a form of laziness? By keeping ourselves so busy and on the go all the time, just go to attain all of these markers of, or so-called markers of success. Usually, instead of us actually being virtuous or being industrious, usually it's a distraction. So how do we overcome this distraction? How do we face ourselves? The most common recommendation that's made by all Buddhist teachers, not just Rinpoche, is to do retreats. And so some people will think, aren't retreats just a form of escape, as opposed to, being busy? So how is it that busyness is an escape? It distracts us from facing ourselves. How do you face yourself? You should do retreats. But when you say that you're doing retreats, then people will ask, isn't doing retreats just a form of escape? The thing is, that comes from a misunderstanding or a misconception of what a retreat is. A retreat isn't escape. A retreat isn't talking about us escaping from our duties or us escaping from our commitments. In retreat, actually, there is no escape, because in retreat, what do you have to escape to? If you're sitting in meditation and all you're doing is visualizing and reciting mantras 12 hours a day, for example, what is there to escape to? When your feelings of anger arise, and they do arise, feelings like anger do arise during retreat. When your feelings of laziness arise, when your feelings of complacency arise, when your feelings of irritation arise, and so on, what is there to escape to? In retreat, you can't escape to your car, you can't escape to your phone, you can't escape to the internet, you can't even go to somebody else to complain to. So what is there to escape to? Alright, so in retreat, what you're actually having to do is you're being forced to face yourself. And that's what Rinpoche always said, if a retreat is done properly, a retreat is a time for us to quieten down all of the distractions that we always ply ourselves with every single day. And a retreat is a time for us to abide in that silence and not be afraid of that silence and have an opportunity to face ourselves. Sometimes we just do and we do and we do and we do, and it feels so good for us to be busy. It feels so good for us to tick off things on our to-do list. And, I can say that because that's something that I am personally guilty of as well, is that it does feel good to have a super long to-do list and then be like, check, 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 and mark things off that list. And, we like to look busy. Society tells us that it's good to look busy. And it makes us look good to other people. And we have this almost pathological need to feel occupied and to feel busy. There is a video that's floating around the internet right now, which is quite funny, but also has a deeper meaning. It's of two trucks, and there's a bunch of guys in the middle, and they're unloading things from one truck to the other. And there's a guy running around in the background, running between the trucks, making it look as though he's helping. So, for example, if he's supposed to carry like a box or a phone or whatever, the guy in front of him is like really struggling to carry the box from one truck to the other. The guy behind, the guy in question, is like giving a light cursory touch, and he's just moving back and forth, and he's not actually getting anywhere, he's not actually doing anything, but it just looks good for him to be busy. And that exists in all of us, that when we don't look busy, when we look like we're not doing something physically, that we feel we should be doing something, or that we feel other people's judgment of us because we don't appear to be busy. And so that's one of the reasons why when you tell people that you're doing retreat, sometimes the reaction you get is, isn't it an escape? Because it looks as though you're doing nothing. It looks as though you're just sitting down praying, when in reality, retreats are the perfect time for us to face ourselves and to face and to really look in and see what kind of people we are. What is it that we need to continue to work on? What is it that we need to continue to improve? And what is it that we can continue to increase? So if we're kind, if we're compassionate, to increase that, that's something that we need to work on outside of the retreat. If we are lazy, that's something that we need to deal with once we come out of the retreat, and so on. All right. So what Rinpoche always taught was that actually, instead of always being on the go and distracting ourselves with everything around us, we need to have a combination of activity and contemplation, and not be afraid of facing the parts of ourselves that we know are destructive, because we don't want to deal with it. All right. So, good morning, Dr. Ming. Good morning, Joseph, and good morning, Jerry. Thank you so much for joining us this morning when I'm talking about laziness, that dirty word, laziness. All right. So, laziness comes. The underlying issue with laziness is selfishness and a lack of care and compassion. We're lazy because we don't want to put the effort into helping other people. We're lazy because we don't want to put, we're lazy in our thinking or feeling ourselves unworthy, so that we don't need to improve ourselves. We don't need to improve ourselves for ourselves or for other people. And also laziness in the sense that we distract ourselves from everything and we keep ourselves very, very busy so that we don't need to face ourselves. All right? So all of these are forms of laziness. And laziness, as I mentioned earlier, good morning, Chong Hin Liu. Thank you for joining us this morning. Laziness, as I mentioned earlier, arises from selfishness and a lack of care and compassion. And why do I say that? Why did Rinpoche say that? When you don't care, you don't need to do. When you're not compassionate and you're not attempting to cultivate compassion or to generate bodhicitta, then you don't need to do it. So you get to be lazy. It's fine to be lazy because you don't care about anyone else. You don't even care about yourself. You don't care about yourself having to transform or to improve or to progress. And you also don't care about other people and how they are doing and what assistance is that you can offer to them. So when we don't care, when we have a lack of care and compassion, that's when laziness arises. Comfort zones, which Rinpoche often spoke about, is also a manifestation of our laziness, because our wish to abide in our comfort zone, to only tackle what it is that we are comfortable with or that we are used to, and not push ourselves to learn or to challenge ourselves to learn anything more or to learn anything different or anything new, that's also a manifestation of our laziness, all right? So one thing that Rinpoche shared with us before as well is that laziness, as an example of laziness arising from a lack of compassion, is when we're too lazy to do our work well or to complete a job properly. So how laziness is a manifestation of our lack of compassion is that in those situations, we leave the job to someone else to do, to correct our mistakes, to pick up the pieces after us, to clean up after our mess, because we're too lazy to have done it properly ourselves in the first place, all right? So laziness, in effect, is actually contradictory to our attempts to cultivate compassion. Oh, I'm glad you think so, Jerry. Right? When we don't care, then we are okay with being lazy. So when we don't care, we aren't consistent with our sadhana, for example. We become lazy and we become inconsistent because we don't care to see or to learn the benefits of doing our sadhana consistently. When we don't care, we are too lazy to put in the effort to stay with our teachers or to stay with our guru, especially when things get tough or when things get challenging or when we are pushed to improve or when we are trained to change. All right, so we get lazy about improving. And so some people, when they grow lazy about improving and their quality of not caring comes up, then they go away. And when we are lazy about improvement, that's when our guru devotion goes up and down. So that's how we know that our guru devotion is not real. It's because it's controlled by laziness. Our guru devotion is unstable, or doubts arise in our teacher because we're lazy about our improvement, and hence we start being lazy about maintaining a good view of our teacher and understanding or internalizing the reasons why it's important to have a teacher, or important to undergo the training, or important to be devoted to our teacher. And so that's when our guru devotion goes up and down, because it's all dependent on how we feel at the time. If I'm lazy, then I'm not going to have a good view of my teacher. If I'm not feeling lazy, then I'm going to have a good view of my teacher. And so that's how you see people's relationship with their teacher goes up and down, or their so-called devotion for their teacher is unstable, because that quality that's affecting their stable view of their guru is laziness. All right. So why is laziness damaging? As I mentioned briefly at the beginning of this talk, laziness. Sorry, I keep checking to see the time because the function that I normally use to oversee or manage the live stream is not loading today on Facebook, buggy Facebook, so I'm having to like do double checks. Anyway, why is laziness damaging? As I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, laziness is damaging because it's an obstacle to our greater success and to achieving our potential, whether it's spiritually speaking or whether it's secular. And I was reading a couple of days ago about laziness, and it said that in a Buddhist context, laziness is often described as a thief because it stops us from developing wholesome or positive qualities like effort, like care, and like kindness. And laziness stops us from developing these qualities which can benefit ourselves and also bring tremendous benefit to other people. So whatever it is that we want to accomplish, spiritually speaking, laziness is an obstacle that stops us from achieving that. Laziness is damaging because as an attitude, it's very pervasive. So it spreads without us realizing. So when you are lazy with one thing before you realize it, you will find oftentimes that you become lazy with something else. Because you feel like it's okay to be lazy at those things too. So for example, let's say we are lazy about making offerings on our altar. I'm talking about this from a Buddhist perspective. Let's say we're lazy about making offerings on our altar. Eventually we may find that because we somehow think that it's okay to be lazy about making offerings on our altar, then we get lazy about making offerings to our Lama. And then from being lazy to make offerings to our Lama, then we get lazy about being ready to serve our Lama in an excellent way whenever he requests of us. Then from there, we find that because we are not, so it starts off with being lazy to make offerings, then it could escalate to being lazy to make offerings to the teacher. Then from there, it becomes, for example, lazy to serve the teacher, and then it may escalate to be lazy to have a good view of our teacher always, and then it could become lazy to apply training to our spiritual practice. Then from there it grows to being lazy to even come to the center, and then becomes lazy to participate, and then finally it's laziness to even come at all. So laziness as an attitude is pervasive because once we start thinking that it's okay to be lazy with one thing, it can grow to becoming lazy with other things as well. So in that way, laziness is also insidious because it trains us to make excuses to ourselves, and these excuses sound perfectly valid. Alright, so if we don't do our sadhana one day, then somehow in the back of our minds, it becomes okay for us not to do our sadhana the following day. And then from the second day on, you think, oh well, since I haven't done it for 2 days already and I haven't seen any adverse effects immediately in the immediate short term, it should be okay for me to skip it on the third day as well. And so that's how laziness grows, is that it starts from one day, from one moment, and then it grows on to the next and the next, because we get trained into making excuses which sound valid. Alright, and it also trains us to try and hide our laziness. So laziness is insidious in the way that it also reinforces some of the other destructive or non-virtuous habits that we may have developed over time. For example, because as I mentioned, society trains us to think that it's good to look industrious, that it's virtuous to look busy all the time. And so when we're lazy and we know that we're lazy, we try to hide it. Naturally speaking, because we don't want other people to think badly of us, to think that we're lazy. So laziness in that way also reinforces other habits. For example, sneakiness, because we don't want other people to discover that we're lazy. All right. So, for example, parents will see this with children who are lazy to do their homework. And so because they're lazy to do their homework, but they don't want you to know that they haven't done their homework, then they may lie, or they may use speech to try and cover up the fact that they haven't done their homework, or they may make excuses. So the laziness escalated into lying. Another example is people who are at work who aren't doing very much, but they act very, very busy. So there's a sneaky element to that, which is they know they're supposed to be doing work, they're paid to do their work, but because they don't want their colleagues to think badly of them, then they try to act very, very busy to cover up the fact that they're not accomplishing very much. So laziness is insidious in the way that it trains us to make excuses which sound valid, and it trains us to do things to try and hide the fact that we are being lazy. So it reinforces other non-virtuous habits that we may already have, all right? Excuse me. So laziness in that way is also habit forming, and not necessarily good habits. So it reinforces the non-virtuous or negative habits that we already have, and it also helps us to create new and destructive patterns. So as I mentioned earlier, laziness arises from lack of care and compassion. So when we're lazy and we are continuously lazy, we are reinforcing our habit to not care. Oh gosh, it has frozen and I don't know whether the feed is continuing. Oh, it's been really weird the last few days. We were having technical problems with JP yesterday as well on JP's feed. Okay, let me see. Oh, okay, seems to be working again. So laziness is habit forming in the way that it reinforces our negative habits that we may already have, and it also creates new and destructive patterns for ourselves. So, for example, every time we're lazy, because laziness arises from our lack of care and compassion, when we're lazy, it trains us not to care. Because if we don't care, then we don't have to think or we don't have to do something. Once you care, it's very difficult to ignore when people are having problems. Oh, good morning, Sharon. Thank you for joining us. And good morning, Chong Hin Liu. Thank you for joining us this morning. If you guys are having technical difficulties, like things are slowing down and stuff, please let me know, all right? Because I can't really tell, because like I said, Facebook's been super weird. Laziness may also train us in the new and destructive pattern of always looking for the easy way out, because oftentimes it feels easier. It feels, but it's not necessarily. It feels easier to do nothing. All right. So laziness may train us to always look for the easy way out, which may not necessarily be the correct or the right way out of something or the right solution to something. And how else is laziness damaging? Laziness is damaging because not only is it pervasive, not only is it habit forming, not only is it insidious, but the end result of laziness and the reason why it's damaging is because it ultimately ends up leading to loneliness. If you think about it, given how much society abhors laziness or abhors sloth-like behavior, who wants to hang out with a lazy person? Does a wife want to have a lazy husband, or does a husband want to have a lazy wife? Does a student in school want a lazy group partner? Does a person at work want a lazy boss or a lazy colleague? And if you think about it, when you observe a lazy person, what is the first thought that pops into your mind? Do you think, oh, let me get closer to this lazy person, let me get to know this lazy person better? Or do you think, oh, actually I would rather stay away, because I know that if I get together with this person who's lazy to think or lazy to do or lazy to help or whatever it is, or even lazy to care, when you see a person like that, it doesn't make you want to get closer to them, or would you rather stay away? So if we are someone who is lazy or who enjoys being lazy, then an eventuality that we need to learn to accept is that we need to learn to accept that we will be lonely. We will need to learn to be okay with being lonely, because just as much as we don't like to be around lazy people, if we ourselves are lazy, the logical conclusion therefore is that people will not like to be around us. So the super hardworking wife who comes home and then sees her husband laying about, washing dishes. Okay, now not washing dishes rather, and not doing the housework. Okay, maybe after 1 year, 2 years, still alright. After 3 years, 4 years, starting to get a little difficult. After 5, 6, 7, 8 years, after a decade, people get tired of it. People get tired of somebody not caring. People get tired of somebody not pulling their weight. If you're on a group project and you keep being paired out with the same person over and over again, and you know that person's not going to pull their weight because they just could not be bothered, they're just too lazy to put in the effort to think or to care, over time, you're not going to want to hang out with that person. You're not going to want to be friends with that person outside of the classroom situation. If you are in a team at work where someone never pulls their weight, but likes to take the credit and is always there for the celebration, eventually you're not going to want to hang out with the person outside of work. So if we want to be lazy and if we're okay with being lazy, what Rinpoche always said is that we need to learn to be okay with being alone, because nobody likes to hang out with a lazy person. All right. Oh, good morning, Hannah. Thank you for joining us this morning, and good morning, Auntie in Canada. All right, so I've talked about where laziness comes from, which is a lack of care and compassion, and ultimately from selfishness. I've talked about how laziness is damaging in the sense that it's pervasive, it's insidious, it's habit forming, and that the end result is loneliness. I've talked about the three types of laziness. So the laziness of action, the laziness of thinking and feeling that we're unworthy, and then the laziness of action and distraction, always distracting ourselves from having to face ourselves. All right, so now that I've talked about all the different ways that laziness is very, very horrible and damaging, and why we should do everything we can to counter laziness and to root out laziness, it would only be fair for me to talk about how we can actually counter the laziness. And the thing that I'm going to paraphrase. I'm going to use a phrase that most of you will be super familiar with. The first thing, most practical thing that we can do to counter laziness is literally just do it. All right. The example that I like to use is the example of people going vegetarian or going vegan, because oftentimes what stops us from pursuing something is the thought of it, as opposed to the actual action. So the example I like to use is veganism or vegetarianism. People giving up meat. Oftentimes we think that the struggle, or we think that being vegetarian, the struggle of being vegetarian, is the thought of it is actually a lot harder than actually doing it. So I find this with many people who end up giving up meat. Before they give up meat, they're always like, "Ayo, very hard lah, can't do it lah. It's so difficult to give up meat lah. I can't go without eating steak. I can't go without eating chicken. I can't go without eating pork. I can't go without eating seafood. And how do you do it? What do vegetarians eat?" And so they go on and on and on and on, and they talk about it a lot. And then when they actually have given it up and they're actually vegetarian, then they're like, "Wow, so easy lah. There's so many things for vegetarians to eat lah. I can't believe that I made such a big deal out of it before." Very consistent with new vegetarians, okay? With people who have newly just given up meat. So what I have found is that sometimes the thought of not doing something is a lot bigger than actually doing it itself. So the first thing about countering laziness is literally just doing it. It's even in the scriptures, it's even in our prayers. When you meditate on the 8 verses, and one of the verses is, "As soon as I see an afflictive emotion, may I firmly confront and avert it." The verse doesn't say, "I will firmly confront and avert it later." The verse doesn't say, "I will deal with my afflictive emotion later." The verse doesn't say, "Maybe I will talk about it," or "Maybe I'll face it and reflect upon it later." The verse says, "As soon as I see it, I will immediately confront it. I'll immediately avert it." So it's not talking about procrastination. It's not talking about putting it off to later. It's not talking about when you feel like it or when the timing is right that you will deal with it. It's talking about doing it now. All right. So that verse and the rest of the 8 verses, the implied message is always being mindful and always being watchful of ourselves from moment to moment, and treating every single moment as practice. So that is literally just doing it. There is not a single moment to let up or to take your foot off the pedal in terms of our practice. So literally just doing it. As soon as you see it, as soon as you see this afflictive emotion, firmly confronting and avert it immediately. All right, so just do it. And so when I'm talking about doing that and talking about being aware of ourselves from moment to moment and treating every moment as practice, that goes back to what I mentioned last week about the development of or the cultivation of diligence and enthusiasm, which is as soon as we so-called mess up, immediately pick ourselves up from where we left off and, moving on from there. Excuse me. All right, so on Rinpoche's blog, actually, there's an interesting article. It's called, it's about the Japanese 1-minute practice for self-improvement or something like that. And Rinpoche talked about how self-improvement is happening from 1 minute to the next, and it happens from 1 minute. It happens 1 minute at a time. So Rinpoche talked about how we should treat each moment or treat each minute as a moment to practice doing something. So if, as I mentioned last week during the talk on diligence and enthusiasm, if we have messed up in one moment, treat the next moment as an opportunity to start up again. Treat the next moment as an opportunity to make a new decision, to do the opposite, or to do what it is that we intended or we wanted to do at the beginning. All right. How we can encourage ourselves to keep doing this from moment to moment over a long period of time is focusing on the benefit to come. Think of all the times when we were lazy to do something, but we ended up really enjoying it in the end, or we ended up enjoying the benefits of it in the end. Oh, hello, Ji Chiang Tan. Thank you for joining us, and Wei Ting, thank you for joining us today. And Joyce, I'm so sorry to hear that you've had a very busy and tiring week. I hope that your weekend has been a little bit more restful, and hopefully something shared in this talk that might help. But yeah, so how do we encourage ourselves to get over laziness, and how do we counter laziness and treat each moment as a new moment to practice? Think about all the times when you were lazy to do something or lazy to get started at something, but you really ended up enjoying it at the end or enjoying the benefits at the end. And as I was talking or discussing the content of this talk with someone earlier this week, and also talking to somebody about exercising, what I shared with them is my personal experience, which is that I'm super lazy to wake up at like 6:45 or even 5 a.m. To cycle, to exercise. My room is dark. It's dark outside. The room is very cold. In Kechara Forest Retreat, when you open the window, all you hear is birds and crickets and frogs and all the other insects of the forest, right? So it's really comfortable, and it's so tempting to sleep and to spend that extra half an hour in bed and not to get up. But what I do is I focus on the fact that when I'm cycling or after I have finished a bike ride, I feel really happy and I feel good. And it's impossible to feel grumpy or irritable whilst you're cycling. So what gets me out of bed is by thinking that, yes, I may be super tired now. It may be dark. No one else is awake in the whole of Bentong. But when I'm on my bike, it's enjoyable. So how I get over that momentary laziness in the morning is by focusing on how I'll feel when I'm on the bike, and then that gets me out of bed. And so when it comes to, for example, spiritual practice, why should we wake up early in the morning to do a retreat session? Why should we wake up early in the morning to make sure that we do a sadhana, a complete sadhana, as opposed to the super short one that we like to jam into our day in between everything else that we're doing? Why should we wake up earlier to do it? Because we know that if we do it, we will be able to reap and enjoy the benefits later on. So focus on the benefits. What are the benefits? And of course, in order to do that, then we need to learn and we need to study more to understand why it's beneficial for us to be consistent in doing our sadhana, why it's beneficial for us to engage in retreats, all right? And sometimes, last week's talk was diligence and enthusiasm. This week's talk is about countering laziness, Joyce. But okay, so yes, focusing on the benefit that's to come. And sometimes it's not easy for us to focus on the long-term benefits because we don't have the clairvoyance to see years into the future. We don't have clairvoyance to see into our future lives. We just don't know what are the long-term benefits. And so sometimes it is a little hard to maintain our enthusiasm for our practice, to maintain consistency for our practice. So going back to taking one moment at a time, it's taking one day at a time. It's sometimes easy for us to go day by day. So for example, let's say we made a New Year's resolution to be healthier, to lose weight, and to become fitter. Sometimes it's hard for us to see how we may feel in a year's time, in 2 years' time, and so on. But we can see if we approach one day at a time. So today, in these 24 hours, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to maintain this healthy lifestyle. It becomes easier for us to take it day by day. And after a while, what you realize is one day has become 2 days, has become 3 days, has become 4 days, and so on until you've completed 365 days. Will you slip in those 365 days? Yes, you will. Will we slip in our practice? Yes, we will. Why? Because we are trying to counter and we're trying to combat lifetimes of previous lifetimes, countless previous lifetimes of negative habituations. So yes, it will take time. It will take time for us to develop consistency in countering countless previous lifetimes of negative karma and negative habits. It will take time. It won't change overnight. So sometimes taking things one day at a time is much easier for us because we just don't have the ability to see the long-term benefits far, far into the future. And that's precisely why we rely on a guru, because our view and our perception of ourselves and of our future and of our lives is never entirely accurate. And there are so many studies about this. I mean, outside of the so-called spiritual or so-called Buddhist realm, you know, there are even clinically diagnosable disorders for people whose perception or whose view of the world of reality of themselves is not accurate. It's become so dysfunctional that it's become something that can be clinically diagnosed as a disorder. Which I mentioned in brief last week, something called body dysmorphic disorder, for example, when our view of our physical self is not accurate and also does not match the view that other people have of us. When we go for tests, when we go for medical exams, and when we go for health checkups, when the doctor finds something else, do we not go for a second opinion? Do we not try to get a third-party perspective on things? So already we know that sometimes what people conclude, what we conclude about ourselves, about others, about the environment around us, about the situation around us, is not necessarily reality. We know from a scriptural point of view, we know this because we know that everything that we view is colored by delusion and is colored by our ignorance. We know this. But we also have real life examples that we can see in front of us. For example, when you go for a medical diagnosis, you go for a second opinion, you go for a third-party perspective, you go for another checkup from another doctor just to confirm that whatever it was that was diagnosed is accurate and real. So we already know this. It's already built into us, all right? So why is it so strange that when we are in a situation, in a medical situation, and we seek out a second opinion, why would it be so strange for us to have a guru to give us a second opinion of ourselves? Just like the medical doctor diagnoses physical ailments, our guru diagnoses and treats our spiritual or our mental afflictions. So it's not weird for us to have a guru, you know, who will shine light into a part of us that we might have blind spots to, that we are unable to diagnose for ourselves. Our gurus, especially someone like Rinpoche, who has clairvoyance and has omniscience, they can see where we will lead, where we will end up if we continue to enact or exhibit the destructive habits that we have been performing for many, many years. Why can they do this? Clairvoyance, omniscience, yes. But also, in the case of someone like Rinpoche, having met thousands of people in his lifetime, Rinpoche always said that, you know, Rinpoche has met so many people in Rinpoche's lifetime that Rinpoche could always tell and could profile people and say that if they were engaging in this pattern of behaviors, this would be the result. Why? Because Rinpoche has seen that same pattern of behaviors arising in that particular result over and over again, over 30, 40, 50 years of meeting people. All right? So our gurus can see things that we can't. Our guru offers us that second opinion or that opinion of ourselves that we have blind spots to. And to see how certain qualities that we may have may be destructive or may be harmful to ourselves or to other people. So our guru then counters our laziness to deal with this by giving us instructions, by giving us assignments, by giving us advice and so on. All right? I'm almost done. So if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. All right? Finally, how can we counter our laziness? By meditating. So meditate. Why is it that we are lazy to do virtuous things, but we are not lazy to do non-virtuous things? So meditate strongly on that. For example, and this is the example I always give because it's very applicable to Malaysians. Why is it that we're okay to drive for 45 minutes to Klang to eat seafood, or drive for 3 hours to Penang to eat char kway teow, which I did before when I was in high school and I was very, very free. So why is it that we're okay to drive 45 minutes to Klang to eat seafood, or to Ipoh to eat chicken rice or hor fun, or 3 hours to Penang to eat char kway teow, but 45 minutes to Bentong is so far away and I can't drive to Bentong to Kechara Forest Retreat to volunteer? Why? Why is it okay for us to spend Friday nights stuck in traffic, to go downtown to go clubbing, to go to KL to go clubbing, but it's so difficult for us to sit that same amount of time on Saturday night to go to Kechara Soup Kitchen to volunteer, to give food to the homeless? So why is it that we are super gung-ho and enthusiastic about pursuing non-virtuous things, but we're very, very lazy about pursuing virtuous things? Laziness is a manifestation of our negative karma that's manifesting to stop us from applying, from pursuing measures which will improve us, which will transform us, which will benefit us and benefit other people. So laziness is, if you meditate on the fact that laziness is actually a manifestation of our negative karma, it becomes much easier for us to overcome that, because then we know that it's not a permanent part of us. It's something that can be overcome. It's something that once it's extinguished, will no longer affect us. Meditate also on the kindness of other people, the kindness of our parents who nurtured us, the kindness of our friends who stuck with us through thick and thin, who put up with all our BS and all our temper tantrums and all the times we feng on them, cancelled on them, who continue to help us after years and years of us, complaining to them and so on. Meditate on the kindness of colleagues at work who have been kind to us. Sometimes when we worked very late nights, they brought us a coffee, or they brought us food. Or meditate on the kindness of our Dharma brothers and sisters who stick with us through thick and thin. Right? So when we meditate on the kindness of other people, we have to ask ourselves, how much have they done for us, and how much have we done in order to repay our kindness? And so it becomes much easier when you meditate on the kindness of other people to push yourself to counter your laziness and to counter our self-absorption in order to repay their kindness. So meditate on why we are so enthusiastic and so diligent about pursuing non-virtuous activities, but so lazy about pursuing virtuous activities. So karma. Meditate on the kindness of other people, which will help us to counter our laziness because we want to repay their kindness. And also meditate on death and meditate on impermanence. Can we afford to be lazy? Can we afford another moment of holding a grudge and being too lazy to put our ego down and to apologize? Do we know when we're going to die? Do we know when it's our last moment on earth, and hence when it's our last opportunity to make amends to all the people that we have hurt? Do we know when for certain when it is that we're going to pass away? Therefore, we still have time left to counter our laziness. Can we afford to continue to be lazy? Is what I'm trying to say. Can we continue to afford to be lazy with our spiritual practice? If you know for sure that you're going to die at this date, at this time, in 80 years' time, maybe you have a little bit of leeway to be lazy about your spiritual practice, because you know that if you spend the next 10 years doing absolutely nothing, you've got another 70 years left to go. But if you don't know when you're going to pass, if you don't know when is the moment of your passing, that will be the last opportunity for you to ever recite a mantra, to ever think of your Lama, to ever do your sadhana. If you don't know when that moment is going to be, how can you afford to be lazy? Right? So meditate on impermanence, meditate on death, meditate on our laziness to pursue virtuous things, and meditate on the kindness of other people and how much we have done to repay the kindness. All right. So that would conclude today's sharing on laziness, how laziness is damaging, where laziness arises from, what kind of lazinesses there are, and how we can counter laziness. If you guys do have questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm on time today, 1 hour. But if you guys do have questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And I will respond to them as soon as this live stream is over. before I go, as usual, I want to give you guys some food for thought, things to chew on. Reflect on the past week. When have you been lazy? When has there been a moment when if you had put a little bit more effort in, somebody else could have benefited? All right? And then as we move into the new week, be watchful, be mindful, be aware, practice awareness. Excuse me. Practice awareness of yourself and of your mind. That when you are approached to do something positive or something beneficial, or when you're approached by someone for help, what is your first thought? What is your first reaction? Is there something that you can do to counter it? When you wake up tomorrow, or when you go to sleep late tonight, and you're super sleepy and you still haven't done your sadhana yet, think, this is a moment for me to practice the suggested methods, the methods that Pastor Gina suggested to counter laziness. I'm so sleepy, I just want to go to bed. I have an early morning tomorrow. I don't want to do my daily prayers. So just think of the benefits of doing a sadhana. Think of why you should be consistent. Think of how it's a method for you to repay the kindness of other people by doing a sadhana, and then do it anyway. All right? Before I go, just some short reminders. Upcoming programs. The Doji Shukden Sadhana has been moved on the Chinese Kechara Facebook fan page. That is now on Sundays at 10 p.m. And then on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. on the Kechara Facebook page. So this one, there's Pastor David doing the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, sharing Easy Dharma for the New Normal. I think he's on verse 102, because this week he was on 101. So he should be on 102 the coming week. And then on Thursday at 8 p.m. we have our Seven Rinpoche Swift Return Puja, which is on the Kecharians and Friends Facebook group. So please join that, because that's actually live streamed. All right. Spiritual Saturdays, as I mentioned earlier, have returned, the physical ones, so people can actually come now as opposed to experiencing it live online. So Spiritual Saturdays have returned, so please sign up for it. And Manjushri Guest House and Enchanted Forest have also reopened for guests. So welcome back, guys. And if you want to do retreats, the place is open for you. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sticking with me throughout this 1 hour. If you have any requests for prayers and offerings to be made, also please leave a comment at the bottom of this live stream, and then I will get back to you as soon as I can. And don't forget to do your dedications. Once this live stream has ended, I will, of course, do my dedications myself afterwards. All right. And again, I want to thank our sponsors, Iman and Sukfan. Thank you so much for sponsoring today's talk, today's sharing. Your contribution made today's talk possible. All right. And your support helps us to keep making these programs available. So if you would like to donate, there is actually a link in the description section of this video, so you can do that. All right. And if you're going to sign off like JP did yesterday, if you guys haven't liked this page, please like, follow, share, subscribe, whatever. And don't forget to enable notifications so that when there is a new live video that comes out, you will be notified. All right. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me. I will see you same time, same place next week, 10 a.m. Malaysian time, GMT +8, all right, for a new topic, which I have not decided yet. So I'll see you guys later, and thank you so much. Have a wonderful Sunday and a fantastic week ahead. Bye, guys.